Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we continue our series on Emerson and his journals, specifically journal collection number 28. That dates from the year 1837. Emerson is now 34 years old and living in Concord, and we are up to April 29th of that year. And with that said, I'll go ahead and start by reading the journal entry for April 29th. Warm and welcome blows the south wind at last, and the sun and moon shine again to raise the desponding hearts of the people in these black times. Yet our idle dallying, tentative conversation goes on, sunshine still lying kindly on my hearthstone. Therefore be lowly, interceding praise from me and mine. Gifts. Mrs. Lee gave me beautiful flowers. These gay natures contrast with the somewhat stern countenance of the world in these latitudes. They are like music heard out of a workhouse or jail. Something like that pleasure the star, the flower, and the tinted cloud give us. Well, what am I, to whom those sweet and sublime hints are addressed? How wild and mysterious our position as individuals to the universe! Here is always a certain amount of truth lodged as intrinsic foundation in the depths of the soul, a certain perception of absolute being as justice, love, and the like, natures which must be the God of God, and this is our capital stock, this is our centripetal force. We can never quite doubt, we can never be adrift, we can never be nothing, because of this holy of holies, out of sight of which we cannot go. Then, on the other side, all is to seek. We understand nothing, our ignorance is abysmal, the overhanging immensity staggers us, whither we go, what we do, who we are. We cannot even so much as guess. We stagger and grope. Fine manners present themselves first as formidable. Miss Fuller read Vivian Grey and made me very merry. Beckendorf is a fine teaching that he who can once conquer his own face can have no farther difficulty. Nothing in the world is to him impossible, as Napoleon who discharged his face of all expression whilst Madame de Staël gazed at him. The existence of a paradise lost, a Dante's Inferno, argues a half disbelief of the immortality of the soul. If for the lowly mind you elect writing for your task in life, I believe you must renounce all pretensions to reading. I will add it to my distinctive marks of man and woman. The man loves hard wood, the woman loves pitch pine. The merchant fails. He has put more than labor, he has put character and ambition into his fortune, and cannot lose it without bitter mortification. It is not clear to the recluse the ambition of the merchant. It seems that he could and should have been content with safe wealth, and not so ventured and so fallen. But the merchant in every conversation in the insurance office feels the weight of his neighbor, a greater capitalist. In every transaction of business he feels his own and his neighbor's measure. He sees that he can augment his own consideration and wield as enviable power. He sees, moreover, that a great fortune has not an evil, a dishonorable influence, that is, its influence is very far from being built on the weakness and sycophancy of men, but it is a certificate of great faculty, of virtues of a certain sort. Moral considerations give currency every day to notes of hand. Success and credit depend on enterprise, on accurate perceptions, on honesty, on steadiness of mind. This man in the land fever bought no acre in Maine or Michigan. His notes of land have a better currency as long as he lives. That man is a commission merchant, and in the midst of a vast business does not trade on his own account to the amount of $1. Everybody gladly buys his paper. Steady, steady. Insertion from the editor. 2 pages of extracts follow concerning French traits from Eckermann, Zeutner, Carlyle, Lacasse, O'Mara, and others. Then a careful list of all Carlyle's writings in the English reviews, and his books up to this time. After these come several extracts translated from Eckermann's Sprache mit Goethe and the correspondence of Goethe with Zelter. A characteristic of Goethe is his choice of topics. What an eye for the measure of things! Perhaps he is out in regard to Byron, but not of Shakespeare, and in Byron he has grasped all the peculiarities. Paper money, periods of belief, cheerfulness of the poet, French Revolution. How just are his views of these trite things! What a multitude of opinions, and how few blunders! The estimate of Sterne I suppose to be one. It is to me very plain that no recent genius can work with equal effect upon mankind as Goethe, for no intelligent man can read him without finding that his own compositions are immediately modified by his new knowledge. I do not remember a joke or aught laughable in all Goethe except Felina cracking nuts upon the trunk, and perhaps Friedrich's jibe at Natalia. Plotinus on Art. Quote, whilst we are convinced that those who behold the intellectual world and the beauty of the true intellect can also well behold their Father, who is exalted over all sense, so let us attempt then to inquire after the powers and ourselves to express, so far as things of this kind can be explained, in what manner we can apprehend the beauty of the soul and of the world. Let two stone blocks be placed together, whereof one is rough, and without artificial labor, but the other is formed by art to a human or divine statue. Were it of a god, so might it represent a Grace or a Muse. Were it of a man, so it is not a historical man, but rather of some one whom art has collected out of all beauties. But to you will the stone which is brought by art into a beautiful form appear altogether beautiful, yet not because it is stone, since then will the other block also pass for beautiful, but because it has a form which art has imparted to it. But matter has no such form, but this was in the thinker before it came to the stone. It was already in the artist, not because he had eyes and hands, but because he was endowed with art. Also was in art a far greater beauty, since not that form which resides in art came to the stone, but that remains where it was, and there went out into the stone another inferior, which does not abide pure in itself, nor quite as the artist wishes, but only as far as the material would obey art. But if art should also produce what it is and possesses, and produce the beautiful after reason, according to which it evermore worketh, yet would the reason the more and truer possess a greater and more conspicuous beauty of art, perfecter than all which exists outwardly. Since whilst the form proceeding into matter is already extended, so is it weak than that which abides in unity. Since what in itself endures a removal departs away from itself. Strength from strength, heat from heat, force from force, so also beauty from beauty. Therefore must the workman be more excellent than the work, since not the unmusic makes the musician, but the music and the supersensual music produces the music and sensuous sound. But would anyone despise art because it imitates nature? Let us reply that the natures also imitate many others, that moreover art does not directly imitate that which eyes can see, but goes back upon the rational out of which nature consists, and after which nature worketh. Furthermore, the arts produced many things out of themselves, and add, on the other hand, many things hereto which lack perfectness, whilst yet they have beauty in themselves. So could Phidias form the god, although he imitated nothing perceptible to the senses, but made himself in his mind such a form of Jove himself would appear if he should become obvious to our eyes. Goethe prefers to drop a profound observation incidentally to stating it circumstantially. For example, Seneca sees nature as an uncultivated man, since not it but its events interest him. Nachgelesen Werk, Volume 8, page 68. Quote, Yet was Tycho Brahe, with all his merits, one of those limited minds who feels himself to be in some measure in contradiction with nature, and on that account love complex paradoxes more than simple truth, and enjoy themselves in error because it gives them occasion to show the sharpness of their wit, whilst he who recognizes the true seems ever to honor God and nature but not himself, and of this last sort was Kepler. Volume 8, page 171. I owe the presentation of a book to NLF, SAD, CWU, BD, Dr. E. H., Mrs. A. D. A. Waltham, Dr. J. Ware. May 1st. I do not forgive in any man this forlorn pride, as if he were an ultimus Romanorum. I am more American in my feeling. This country is full of people whose fathers were judges, generals, and bank presidents, and if all their boys should give themselves heirs thereon, and rest henceforth on the oars of their fathers' merit, we should be a sad hungry generation. Moreover, I esteem it my best birthright that our people are not crippled by family and official pride, that the best broadcloth coat in the country is put off to put on a blue frock, that the best man in town may steer his plough-tail, or may drive a milk-cart. There is a great deal of work in our men, and a false pride has not yet made them idle or ashamed. Moreover, I am more philosophical than to love this retrospect. I believe in the being God, not in the God that has been. I work. My fathers may have wrought or rested. What have I to do with them, or with the Philotas or the great Khan? I know a worthy man who walks the streets with silent indignation as a last of his race, quite contemptuously eyeing the passing multitude as if none of them were for him, and he for none of them, as if he belonged to the club and age of Shakespeare, Bacon, Milton, but by some untoward slip in old spiritual causes he had been left behind by the ethereal boat that ferried them into life, and came now scornful and aged too late. But what a foolish spirit to pout and sneer! That did not these able persons, and if some good-natured angel should transport him into their serene company, they would say unto him, We know you not. What if a man has great tastes and tendencies? Is not that the charm and wonder of time, the oil of life, that in common men everywhere gleam out these majestical traits, so wildly contrasting with their trivial employments, decking their narrow patch of black loam with sunshine and violets, so that the lowest being, intimately seen, never suffers you to lose sight of his relations to the highest and to all? Character is higher than intellect, and character is what the German means when he speaks of Daimonische. Webster in his speech but does half engage himself. I feel that there is a great deal of waste strength. Therefore I say, let me not meet a great man in a drawing-room, or in an academy, or even in my own library, but let him, bound on his private errand, meet me, bound on mine, in the stage-coach, our road being the same for 200 or 300 miles. Then will a right natural conversation grow out of our mutual want of relief and entertainment. Or better yet, put us into the cabin of a little coasting merchantman, to roll welter in the Gulf Stream for a fortnight towards Savannah or St. Croix. I went to see Mr. Jonathan Phillips once, and he said to me, When you come into the room, I endeavor to present humanity to you in a lovely and worthy form, to put away everything that can mar the beauty of the image. He also said that life appeared to him very long. His existence had stretched over a vast experience. May 4th. Margaret Fuller left us yesterday morning. Among many things that make her visit valuable and memorable, this is not the least, that she gave me 5 or 6 lessons in German pronunciation, never by my offer, and rather against my will each time, so that now, spite of myself, I shall always have to thank her for a great convenience, which she foresaw. Economy does not consist in saving the coal, but in using the time whilst it burns. In conversation there are tides, and the visitor of a few days will see the ebb and the succeeding mud, but living is the channel which upbears ships and boats at all hours. Day before yesterday, May 2nd, Dr. Hobbs, Dr. Adams, and Mr. Ripley sent me from Waltham 31 trees which I have planted by my house. What shall I render to my benefactors? Be and seem. Creation is genius, however, whenever. There are few actions, almost all is appetite and custom. A new action commands us and is the Napoleon or Luther of the hour. So with manners, they are sometimes a perpetual creation, and so do charm and govern us. So with opinions. Miss Edgeworth has not genius, nor Miss Fuller, but the one has genius in narrative, and the other has genius in conversation. At Palermo I remember how shabby and pitiable seemed the poor opera company to me, until the prima donna appeared and spoke. Presently she uttered cries of passion, and the mimic scene becomes instantly real, and vies at once with whatever is human and heroic. The lady told me that she had never seen heroic manners. I think she has in fragments, or the word would not be significant to her. I know them well, yet am the least heroic of persons, and I see well that my types of them are not one but many. Marat, Wordsworth, sweet-tempered ability, and a scientific estimate of popular opinion are essential. The law of communication is this. Here am I, a complex human being. Welcome to me, all creatures. Welcome each of you to your part in me. St. Paul to his, the eagle to his, the horse and the bat to theirs. Vivian Gray is a Bible to a class of young persons. May 5th. It is curious to observe how strangely experience becomes thought, or life truth. The conversion is hourly going on. Will and necessity, or if you please, character and condition beget an act. It is a part of life and remains for a time immersed in our unconscious life. To make the omnipresence of God a fact and not a name to the mind, we must look at spiritual laws. The history of the mind is a constant creation. It sleeps on a past law no moment. Let me make a few notes towards a report of the decisions of the Supreme Court. It is strange that I find no such attempt in all the ages at a digest or even a catalogue of them. May 6th. I see with joy the visits of heat and moisture to my trees, and please myself with this new property. I strangely mix myself with nature, and the universal God works, buds and blooms in my grove and parterre. I seem to myself an enchanter who by some rune or dumb gesture compels the service of superior beings. But the instant I separate my own from the tree and the potato field, it loses its piquancy. I presently see that I also am but an instrument, like the tree, a regent. The tree was to grow. I was to transplant and water it, not for me, not for it, but for all. It occurred today how slowly we learn to trust ourselves as the depths of the common nature. When a fashionable man, when a great judge or engineer performs a charity, it gives us pause, it seems strange and admirable, we fear it will not last. Yet the same thing would appear not strange in me, but quite natural. I slowly learn with amazement that in my wildest dream, in my softest emotion, in my tear of contrition, I but repeat moment for moment the impulses and experience of the fashionist, the buccaneer, the slave, or whatever other variety may be of the generic man. Sad is this continual postponement of life. I refuse sympathy and intimacy with people as if in view of some better sympathy and intimacy to come. But whence and when? I am already 34 years old. Already my friends and my fellow workers are dying from me. Scarcely can I see that any new men or women approaching me. I am too old to regard fashion, too old to expect patronage of any greater or more powerful. Let me suck the sweetness of those affections and consuetudes that grow near me, that the divine providence offers me. These old shoes are easy to the feet, but no, not for mine, if they have any ill savour. I was made a hermit, and am content with my lot. I pluck golden fruit from rare meetings with wise men. I can well abide alone in the intervals, and the fruit of my own tree shall have a better flavor. May 7th. The Sabbath reminds me of an advantage which education may give, namely, a normal piety, a certain Levitical education which only rarely devout genius could countervail. I cannot hear the young men whose theological instruction is exclusively owed to Cambridge and to public institution, without feeling how much happier was my star, which rained on me influences of ancestral religion. The depth of the religious sentiment which I knew in my Aunt Mary, imbuing all her genius, and derived to her from such hoarded family traditions, from so many godly lives and godly deaths of sainted kindred at Concord, Malden, York, was itself a culture and education. I heard with awe her tales of the pale stranger, who at the time of her grandfather lay on his deathbed, tapped at the window and asked to come in. The dying man said, "Open the door." But the timid family did not. Immediately he breathed his last, and they said one to another, "It was the angel of death." Another of her ancestors, when near his end, had lost the power of speech, and his minister came to him and said, "If the Lord Christ is with you, hold up your hand." And he stretched up both hands and died. With these I heard the anecdotes of the charities of Father Moody, and his commanding administration of his holy office. When the offended parishioners would rise to go out of the church, he cried, "Come back, you graceless sinner, come back." And when his parishioners ventured into the alehouse on a Saturday night, the valiant pastor went in, collared them, and dragged them forth and sent them home. Charity then went hand in hand with zeal. They gave alms profusely, and the barrel of meal wasted not. Who was it among this venerable line who, whilst his house was burning, stood apart with some of his church and sang, "There is a house not made with hands"? Another was wont to go into the road whenever a traveller passed on Sunday, and entreat him to tarry with him during holy time, himself furnishing food for man and beast. In my childhood, Aunt Mary herself wrote the prayers which my first brother William, and when he went to college, I read aloud morning and evening at the family devotions, and they still sound in my ear with their prophetic and apocalyptic ejaculations. Religion was her occupation, and when, years after, I came to write sermons for my own church, I could not find any examples or treasuries of piety, so high-toned, so profound or promising, such rich influence as my remembrances of her conversation and letters. This day my boy was baptized in the old church by Dr. Ripley. They dressed him in the self-same robe in which 27 years ago my brother Charles was baptized. Lydian has a group of departed spirits in her eye who hovered around the patriarch and the babe. Quote, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." I could ill dissemble my impatience at the show of instruction without one single real and penetrating word. Here is a young man who has not yet learned the capital secret of his profession, namely to convert life into truth, and there he stands pitiable and magisterial, and without nausea, reads page after page of mouth-filling words, and seems to himself to be doing a deed. I thought we might well propose that, as the end of education, to teach the pupil the symbolical character of life. Let him know that a people can well afford to settle large incomes on a man, that he may marry, buy and sell, and administer his own good, if the practical lessons that he thus learns he can translate into general terms, and yield them its poetry from week to week. Truly they will find their account in it. It would elevate their life also, which is contemporary and homogeneous, and that is what the priest is for. Mr. Flint and Mr. Budrick can well afford to come to church to hear Edward Taylor, and will feel that it is the best day in the week, and that they are abler and nobler men for the hearing. But sooner or later they must find out their mistake, and with indignation, when they have nothing for their time and their pew tax but a house full of words. Indeed, the bitter rebuke which such a preacher has is the attentive face and drinking ear of the poor farmer. John Quincy Adams, perhaps the recluse, thinks he has got the whole secret of manner when he has learned that disengaged manners are commanding. But if he sees John Quincy Adams, then he learns that a man may have extreme irritability of face, voice, and bearing, and yet underneath so puissant a will as to lose no advantage thereby. A steady mind, a believing mind, wins the world. May 8th. It ought to have been more distinctly stated in nature that it is that life is our inexhaustible treasury for thought. Years are well spent in the country. My garden is my dictionary. There are 3 degrees of proficiency in this lesson of life. Dr. Ripley has lived so long that he says things now and then with the most laudable impatience, but he idealizes nothing. Out he comes with literal facts and does not dream among words. Homely and dry his things are, because they are traditions accepted for nature, and facts out of life crude and unassimilated, in short, just as he found them. But you do not feel cheated and empty as when fed by grammarians. Charles said when his friend was engaged, "At such times it is a comfort to feel that you are something to offer." May 9th. 2 babies, Willie and Wally, and excellent cousins they prove. Willie conscious of seniority and all the dignity of 22 months, Wally 6 and a fortnight, anything but indifferent to his handsome cousin, whom he regards as a capital plaything, and his hair is divine to pull. So says Wally's mamma, and moreover that he accounts her a porridge pot, and Pap a prime horse. Yesterday in the woods I followed the fine humble bee with rhymes and fancies fine. May 14th. Harder times. 2 days since the suspension of specie payments by the New York and Boston banks. William and his wife and child have spent a little time with us. F. H. Hedge was here day before yesterday. We walked in the wood and sat down there to discuss why I was I. Yesterday came Dr. Channing and Mr. John Phillips, and honored our house with a call. But sages of the crowd are like kings, so environed with deference and ceremony that a call like this gives no true word for the mind and heart. The true medicine for hard times seems to be sleep. Use so much bodily labor as shall ensure sleep, then you arise refreshed and in good spirits and in hope. That have I this morn. Yesterday afternoon I stirred the earth about my shrubs and trees, and quarrelled with the piper grass, and now I have slept, and no longer am morose, nor feel twitchings in the muscles of my face when a visitor is by. The humble bee and the pine warbler seem to me the proper objects of attention in these disastrous times. The hollowness so sad we feel after too much talking is an expressive hint. I am less inclined to ethics, to history, to aught wise and grave and practic, and feel a new joy in nature. I am glad it is not my duty to preach these few Sundays, and I would invite the sufferers by this screwing panic to recover peace through these fantastic amusements during the tornado. Our age is ocular. May 19th. Yesterday Alcott left me after 3 days spent here. I had, quote, lain down a man and waked up a bruise, quote, by reason of a bad cold, and was lumpish, tardy, and cold. Yet could I see plainly that I conversed with the most extraordinary man and the highest genius of the time. He is a man. He is erect. He sees. Let whoever be overthrown, or parasitic, or blind. Life he would have, and enact, and not nestle into any cast-off shell and forms the old time, and now proposes to preach to the people, or to take his staff and walk through the country conversing with the school-teachers and holding conversations in the villages. And so he ought to go publishing through the land his gospel, like them of old times. Wonderful is his vision, the steadiness and scope of his eye at once rebukes all before it, and we little men creep about ashamed. It is amusing even to see how this great visual orb rolls around upon object after object and threatens them all with annihilation, seemeth to wither and scorch. Coldly he asks, whether Milton is to continue to meet the wants of the mind, and so Bacon, and so of all. He is, to be sure, monotonous. You may say one gets tired of the uniformity. He will not be amused. He never cares. He never cares for the pleasant side of things, but always truth and their origin he seeketh after. Society an imperfect union. Is it not pathetic that the action of men on men is so partial? We never touch but at points. The most that I can have or be to my fellow man, is it the reading of his book, or the hearing of his project in conversation? I approach some Carlyle with desire and joy. I am led on my month to month with an expectation of some total embrace and oneness with the noble mind, and learn at last that it is only so feeble and remote and hyant action as reading a Mirabeau or Diderot paper, and a few the like. This is all that can be looked for. More we shall not be able to teach each other. Balked soul. It is not that the sea and poverty and pursuit separates us. Here is Alcott by my door, yet is the union more profound? No, the sea, vocation, poverty, are seeming fences, but man is insular and cannot be touched. Every man is an infinitely repellent orb, and holds his individual being on that condition. George Bradford compares the happiness of George Ripley, riding the horse to plow with boys in Boston of his age, who are too old to play on the common, and who can only dress and fix straps to their pantaloons. Men are continually separating and not nearing by acquaintance. Once Dr. Channing filled our sky. Now we become so conscious of his limits and of the difficulty attending any effort to show him our point of view that we doubt if it will be worth while. Best amputate. Then we come to speak with those who most fully accord in life and doctrine with ourselves, and lo, what mountains high and rivers wide, how still the word is to seek which can, like a ferryman, transport either into the point of view of the other. Invisible repulsions take effect also. The conversation is tentative, groping, only partially successful, and although real gratification arises out of it, both parties are relieved by solitude. I more. I hug the absolute being, unbroken, undefined, of my desert. I bask in beauty, that I may be inspired with a greater ambition, and taught to conquer in my own person every calamity by understanding it and its cause. I ought to live toward it, grasping firm in one hand the hand of the invisible guide, until gradually a perfect insight of the disaster is an everlasting deliverance from its fear. Yes, it is true there are no men. Men hang upon things, they are overcrowed by their own creation. A man is not able to subdue the world. He is a Greek grammar. He is a money machine. He is an appendage to a great fortune, or to a legislative majority, or to the Massachusetts Revised Statutes, or to some barking and bellowing institution, association, or church. But the deep and high and entire man, not parasitic upon time and space, upon traditions, upon his senses or his organs, but who utters out of a central hope any eternal voice or sovereignty, we are not, and when he comes we hoot at him. Behold, this dreamer cometh. Symbols on symbols, riddles, phantoms, lo how they rise. Idealism may be held steadily and ethically. I see a certain obstruction as a depreciation of my property. The creative me is then to energize and counter-create, which it does in certain wills and affections, whose external signs and termini are lucrative labors, property, stocks, and the like. May 20th. The man of strong understanding always acts unfavorably upon the man of reason, disconcerts, and makes him less than he is. Is the world sick? Bankruptcy in England and America, tardy rainy season, snow in France, plague in Asia and Africa, these are the morning's news. Ill nature, peevishness is a contagious matter. It is seated no deeper than temperaments, and inflamed or allayed by weather, quantity of food, of sleep, and the news. May 21st. He judgeth every man, yet is judged by no man. I see a good in such emphatic and universal calamity as the times bring, that they dissatisfy me with society. Under common burdens, we say there is much virtue in the world, and what evil coexists is inevitable. I am not aroused to say, I have sinned, I am in the gall of bitterness, and bond of iniquity. But when these full measures come, it then stands confessed. Society has played out its last stake. It is checkmated. Young men have no hope. Adults stand like day laborers idle in the streets. None calleth on us to labor. The old wear no crown of warm life on their gray hairs. The present generation is bankrupt of principles and hope as of property. I see man is not what man should be. He is the treadle of a wheel. He is a tassel at the apron string of society. He is a money chest. He is the servant of his belly. This is the casual bankruptcy. This the cruel oppression that the ideal should serve the actual. I am forced to inquire if the ideal might not also be tried. Is it to be taken for granted that it is impracticable? Behold, the boasted world has come to nothing. Prudence itself is at her wit's end. Pride and thrift and expediency, who jeered and chirped and were so well pleased with themselves, and made merry with the dream, as they termed it, of philosophy and love, behold, they are all flat, and here is the soul erect and unconquered will. What answer is it now to say it has always been so? I acknowledge that, as far back as I can see the widening procession of humanity, the marchers are lame and blind and deaf, but to the soul that whole past is but one finite series in its infinite scope. Deteriorating ever and now desperate, let me begin anew, let me teach the finite to know its master. Let me ascend above my fate and work down upon my world. May 22nd. Let us not sit like snarling dogs, working not at all, but snapping at those who work ill. I said, if you sleep, you show character. And the young girls asked what it could mean. I will tell you. The Black Times have a great scientific value. It is an epoch so critical a philosopher would not miss. As I would willingly carry myself to be played upon at Faneuil Hall by the stormy winds and strong fingers of the enraged Boston, so is this era more rich in the central tones than many languid centuries. What was, ever since my memory, solid continent now yawns apart and discloses its composition and genesis. I learned geology the morning after an earthquake. I learned fast on the ghastly diagrams of the cloven mountains and upheaved plain and the dry bottom of the sea. The roots of orchards and the cellars of palaces and the cornerstones of cities are dragged into melancholy sunshine. I see the natural fracture of the stone. I see the tearing of the tree and learn its fiber and its rooting. The artificial is red from the eternal. Among provocatives, the next best thing to good preaching is bad preaching. I have even more thoughts daring or enduring it than at other times. It is easy for the philosophic class to be poor. Poverty is their ornament. They wear it with a sort of silent protest and challenge admiration. They need not immerse themselves in sense. They scorn to knit their brows on the merits of a sauce and a soup, because they are haunted with the thought that matter has higher uses, namely, its poetical use or language. But not so easy is it to the unphilosophical class to be poor. My friend has no books, no conversation, no fine insight, in short, no certificate that he is any better man than his 1,000 neighbors, except his great house and marble mantelpieces, his superb centre table, and the portfolio of engravings lying on it. These realize to him his inward merit. These are tough medals of his honesty and labor and the regard of fellow men. It is very cruel of you to insist, because you can very well forego them, that he shall. I wrote that men class themselves by their perception of the symbolical character of life. As a stepping stone to this perception, they have certain translations to be made intellectually in their common life. Thus, every object of convenience, whether food or dress or utensil, is readily and habitually considered as property, and immediately appraised in money, and the master of a family learns to translate every article that passes before him as household commodity into a money value, which he measures as a proportion to the income of his estate. This is the end of part 2 of Emerson's journal collection number 28. In the following video, we will take up Emerson's journal with the date being May 23rd. Thank you for listening.